Hi, welcome to the uh, SAP BW session. In this session, we're going to see one of the important topic in SAP BW data extraction, which is called logistic extraction. So most of the time in every company, when you go for work or when you have an interview, for 100% sure that they will be asking what is logistic extraction and what are the steps involved in it. So I'm going to teach some of the theoretical part of how the logistic extraction is going to occur in a generic scenario as well in SAP BW in ECC. Then we will see how to load data as well if there is time for it. If not, then I will go with the theoretical today. Then we will next section I'm going to let you know about the practical. Okay. So let's begin the class right now. So if you remember the last class, what we learned, the extractor types, right? So in the extractor types, there is application specific and cross application. In application specific, there is something called SAP BW content extractor, right? That's BW content extractor. So in that content extractor, you would have seen something called LO. LO is nothing but logistics extraction. So logistics extraction is basically for sales and distribution. So before jumping into the extraction itself, you should know what is basically happening in the sales and distribution. So I will go ahead and give you a few snapshot of what is happening, and then we can see about how the extraction is still happening, right? Okay. So just to understand the sales and distribution module, so most of you would know at least know briefly what is happening in sales and distribution, right? So in the first step would be, it's like the sales is generated, right? Sales in the sense the sales function will enable the user to accept what they need and then enter the customer orders in the system. For example, if it's a manufacturing company, right? Okay, so user, when there is some kind of a request is being sent from a customer, so what you do is you need to know what they need and the customer orders, right? So what are the orders they probably they would have asked for multiple items, so those items need to be entered in the system, right? So that's the first step of the sales, right? Once you enter it and then you combine everything, the sales division and then the financial division, what is the amount is going to be charged for this sale. Then the next step is shipping, delivery, and distribution. So in this process, what happens is there is something called, so when somebody requesting a product, first thing what you do is to check the inventory, right? So you need to find out whether the product requested by the user is available in the inventory first, right? So maybe they would have asked hundreds, maybe they would have asked thousands, right? So you have to check the inventory. If it is available, then what you do is create a outbound delivery, right? So you need to create a delivery, package slip is there, packaging slip has to be delivered, and then you post, and once the outbound delivery is created, then you post the goods issues, right? The issue, you have to say that okay, the product is available, and then we have created a packing slip. Next is to post, okay, so the issue is basically the goods are ready for issuing, right? Those things to be updated in the system. System in the sense what I'm talking here is exclusively SAP ECC. Okay, SAP ECC is the module where you will create all the documents and everything, right? So once it has been documented, then we will load into business warehouse. Okay, so finally the sales has been generated, and then basically we check the inventory, and then the shipping, delivery, distribution is done. Once you do this step, ultimately the thing coming is the billing. So you have to bill the customer for the product what we send to them, right? So that basically enables the billing function basically enables the invoice creation, customer billing, right? Customer billing basically. So every customer will have a contract. For example, some customer will be signing up a contract that we will buy the product from you for another 6 months if you give us some discount, right? So like that, the pricing condition differs based on customer to customer. So this is just a simple understanding of what is a flow of a sales and distribution. Okay, so if you understand this, then we will go to the underlying structures. Okay, so first screen, whatever you saw is a generic process of sales and distribution. But what happens when you do the processing in the ECC, right? So in ECC, we got several tables, in underlying tables available in ECC. So not all the data is being stored in the same table, but it's we have a multiple table created by SAP for our easier activities, and to identify what are the different information available in for the particular sales and distribution, right? So this is the different tables, whatever you will be available in the ECC where the data has been loaded. Because the data, the operation is like this from left to right from whatever you have. So first thing is there is something called VA1, VA2. Okay, VA01 and 02 are the table which will have the data of the sales order. Sales order is as another, so this is called VBAK and VBAP are the table name. Okay, right? So that's a VA1, VA2 is a process, and then the sales order information is stored in VBAK and VBAP. Okay, once the sales order is stored, then we need to also store the other information, right? So billing is stored in another two tables called VBRK, VBRP. It's a header and item. So header and item. So what I would suggest is go ahead and look for these two terms in the search for these in the internet, and then find out what are these. Okay, you should know what is the difference between header and an item. Okay, and sales order is stored in VBAK, VBAP. Again, billing is stored in VBRK, VBRP, and the pricing is stored in KONH is a header, KONP is a item. Okay, and the shipping information is stored in VTTK, VTTP. Okay, finally the payment and then delivery. The payment is an account receivable, AR. This is an FI, right? FI. Anything related to account is FI, right? And then delivery information is stored in the LIKP and LIPS, header and item. Okay, find the difference between header and item so that you will have some knowledge about it, right? Okay, so this is an underlying structure, or I would say table, where we have all the information regarding sales and distribution. Okay, so in the previous screen you saw that these are the underlying table, right? So when a document is posted, or when a sales order is created, the data is stored in multiple places. One is the table itself, like this is the table available in the ECC. Also, it's stored in a place called statistical table. The statistical table is the one I will explain in the next screen or future screen what it will do. Okay, so whatever the information what has been stored in the different tables also stored in a statistical table. Okay, so it's like the customer statistics, sales office, sales organization, product purchasing, amount of current stock and grouping terms. These are all different statistical table. Okay, these tables also have the same data of the other underlying tables where the sales and distribution information is stored. Okay, so what happens, why we need still statistical table is, for example, if you want to create a report on top of the data, right? So instead of directly hitting the tables where you have the document itself, this is an additional separate table where you can access the data so that the performance is not affected, right? So that's one of the the main feature why we need statistical tables. Okay, so we saw statistical tables, right? And there is something which we need to write, something called update modules in ECC. So these are the three different update modules. What you see here, V1, V2, and V3, right? So what happens is V1 update. Okay, I will explain this one in the system itself, but right now just try to grasp, listen to what I am talking about these modules. Okay, these are three different important modules. Update module in ECC, how the data is getting updated. So V1 update is basically a synchronized update. V1 is a synchronous update. So what V1 does is, these are all processes. Okay, these are all processes. Basically, when there is something called the logical unit of work, means when there is a sales order or document is created, this is how the data is updated. Okay, so V1 update is a synchronous update which will handle the data for mission critical, right, and controlling functions. Okay, so when I go back here, so all these data are mission critical data. So when we don't have this information, then we don't know what's going on in the sales and distribution, right? So to load or to update those data, we will use the V1 update, synchronized. Okay, these are all transparent. You will be able to see. I will show you the screen, but whatever happening behind, you might not know. Okay, so there is another one called V2 update. V2 update is a asynchronous data. Okay, so what will happen here is, in V2 update, the data are stored for the non-critical functions, like such as statistical table, the one you saw before, right? So whenever there is a data document is posted, when V1 update happens, it only loads the data into primary tables. Okay, that's only for the operational purposes. But when V2 update, what happens is it's an asynchronous, right? So this will handle the data for secondary non-critical function. For example, you want to create a report on top of that. So all the data are stored in another table called statistical table, where from there you can create reports, right? And there is something called V3. V3 is a collective run, or you can also say batch asynchronous. So V3, again, the same data is stored in the V3. When we run V3, the same data, whatever has been updated in the primary tables, are stored in the in this batch process. So this will be exclusively used for extracting data into BW. Okay, so whenever somebody asks you what are the three different modules available, you would start with saying that V1 update is a synchronized, only used to update the primary tables. V2 is a asynchronous, is used to update the secondary tables or non-critical functions such as statistical tables. And V3 is a collective run, which is trigger based. Basically, it will we are stimulating a trigger from the statistical tables to bring the data into the BW extraction. So these are the three different modules. Okay, update modules, how the data is updated in the system. Okay, V1, V2, V3. Okay. So here, if you see, this is the systematic representation how the data is being extracted from ECC to BW. So what happens first is sales document is created, right? Sales document is created means the data is stored in the tables VBA, KVBAP, okay, all the different tables sales document is stored. Okay, the sales stock, the same data is stored in a place called structure, called communication structure. This structure only will talk to the the extraction structure. So I will explain everything about this when you do a practice, the practical session. Then at that time you'll be able to know what I'm talking about. Okay. So whenever you create a sales document in ECC, the data are stored in the primary tables, and from primary table data goes to a place called communication structure. So this is the structure will have the same data from multiple tables. Okay, this is a kind of a view. So there is two different communication structure which I've taken here for our example. One is VBAK, VBAP. This is a sales order, right? From the communication structure, we have to extract the data into the extraction structure. Okay, so communication structure is again a view of a multiple table. Okay, and from here what I'm going to do is, this is the extract structure from where we will be loading data into the business warehouse. Okay, so in the extract structure there is two different structures. There one is an extractor, other was a transfer. Okay, so in the extractor what we will be having is whatever the data available from the communication structure, we will have an extract structure. But in the transfer structure, you will only have what field need to be loaded into the PSA. Okay, right? So when we do the practice, we will know exactly what is going on here. Okay, so I'm going to just explain to you. Just this is the process of loading data from ECC into BW. So I wanted to clearly understand. Sales document is created and data is stored in the primary table. From there, it goes to the communication structure. Okay, and then it goes to the okay. Okay, this is the, so once you activate the extractor structure, like it's very similar to the extractor is very similar to the data source what we activated yesterday, right? But it could have some other extra features as well. Okay, so this is the ECC part, and from here once you activate the data source, then you will replicate it into the VW, and then you create PSA on top of that. Okay, right? So this is a process for loading LO data from ECC to business warehouse. Okay, so I'm going to, this is the part one of it. So I also have to tell you how the data is being loaded into. There are three different types of ways. Like, okay, so data is loaded from the ECC to business warehouse. So again, this is called initialization setup and delta mechanism. For example, if somebody is implementing, any company is implementing a SAP, right? So at the beginning, there will be no data in the BW, right? We have to initialize the data. For example, if somebody asks you, okay, implementing ECC and then BW. So in the ECC, they will be loading last few years of sales and distribution data from a different source system. Okay, that data has to be initiated into or replicated into business warehouse. Okay, so there are several steps available. So we're going to learn one by one right now. Okay. Okay. So this is like initial or full load versus delta extraction. Okay. So whenever a document is posted in the ECC, the data is stored in primary table, and from the primary table it goes to the application table or statistic table. Okay, application table. Okay, so in the very first beginning, for example, initial load of sales and distribution into business warehouse, what the process involved is from the application table. Okay, it's a full load. Okay, first time we are loading, it's a full load. There is nothing we can leave it to the BCC because that's not a then you won't see everything. All the historical data up to date will be loaded into the ECC into BW. Okay, So in the initial or full load, what happens is from application table, data is stored into the something called setup table. Okay, the setup table is the place where the data is. It's a temporary table. Okay, that is the way it's been represented as like MC11 represent what type of a data source it is. Okay, so which when we go to the system, then you will know what is this. Okay, and then VA is basically sales header and then the setup. Okay, communication structure number 11 is the representation of a sales or it's a billing or whatever. Okay, and then VA HDR setup. So first time full load application table, from there setup table, then data goes into the data source, and this is the data source. Okay, L2 LIS 11 VA HDR, and then we replicate into business warehouse. Okay, this is the first time. Moving forward, for example, you're loading a first time for last 5 years, right? You do this process. From the next day onwards, you don't need to load the last 5 year data. Only what you need to load is the previous day data, right? So that's called delta. So for this, it's a separate different process. Like the data is processed in the application table, right? And then it's stored in a place called BW delta Q. This delta Q is basically a V3 collective update. Okay, it collects all the data for the last 1 day or 2 day, whichever the time period that you are loading, or it could be 1 hour, every 1 hour. Most of the time it's like every 1 hour. The sales and distribution is very important data, so they will always need to know every time, every hour, the data has been extracted into. It's collected in the delta Q, and at the night we will load the data into into business warehouse using process chain. Okay, so this is the delta extraction. So two types of extraction: initial or full load, or init or full load, and delta extraction. Okay, so first time you do this initial load and with setup table, and the second time with through a delta Q. For this delta Q, there is another couple of options are available, which you will see now, right? Let's first see what is the initialization mechanism. Okay, you should know what is this one first, right? So initialization means the data from the primary table is stored into the application tables. Okay, from there it moved to the setup table. Okay, initialization involves filling up data into setup tables for a selected application. Okay, the T code is called SBIW. Okay, so what happens in this process is it will ensure the optimal extraction process, also the minimal load on the application table. Okay, so because we have, instead of we are directly hitting the application table, right, we will load the data into setup table, so that this is acting as an intermediate or as a buffer. Okay, so the data so whenever there is a trigger from a BW, it only hit the setup table. It's totally sitting separate than the application table, right? So we don't impact the performance tuning, right? Performance, right? So that's why, and the T code is called SBIW, right? That's what the one we saw before, the initial load. And the delta mechanism, we got 3 different types of delta mechanism, and that's in the T code called LBWE, that's called logistic cockpit. One is a direct delta, second one is a queued or serialized V3, third is a unserialized V3. Okay, let's see what are the 3 different, what these are, right? Direct delta, queued, unserialized. Okay, right? Or direct delta, serialized, unserialized. Okay, let's go ahead and see. This is the direct delta. So what happens here is, whenever there is a data loaded, right, from the application table, right, data has been moved into the V1 update, right? Directly. So for example, direct delta means every time when the data is document is created, the process is triggered and then the data is loaded into the application table and then delta queue, and from there the data is go to the data source. Okay, this is a direct delta. So when you will use this one you need the data every now and then this will only, this has a constraint of 10,000 records can only loaded at one point of time. Okay, whenever there is a, so what time you use this? You will use when there is a less amount of data. We know that the sales and distribution has a very less amount of data created on a particular day, then you will use this one. Okay, and again this is a direct process. For example, somebody is creating a document. As soon as they create the document and then press enter, immediately the data is loaded into the delta queue. But the disadvantage is, for example, if somebody user is creating a sales document and then he just create and then click submit, right? The data is loaded, but again if there is any mistake has been done, then he reverse back. So all these informations are not captured here. Okay, so it's like an instantaneous load. V1 is a direct load. You directly load the delta data. Okay. Other one is the queued or serialized V3. So this is the one of the best method which is available to load a sales and distribution into business warehouse. Okay. So we will see what happens here. So in the same, it actually consists of V1 and V3. This is Q delta is basically consists of V1 and V3. So what happens is the same process. A user is creating a document. The document is instantly processed, and then from V1 update is a direct delta, right? So direct delta it stores to the application tables as well to another table called logistic extraction queue. It's not a table, it's a queue. Okay, so whenever you create a document using V1 update, it's stored in the application table as well. The same data is stored in the queue as well. Okay, so what happens here is, so even though there is some reverse of data, so again it will be stored in the queue until the original data load happens in the business warehouse, because data load does not happen every now and then. The data is collected in a queue, and then using V3 update, it goes to another queue called delta queue, which is exclusively for business warehouse. Then it loads into the data source. Okay, so queue delta has two different types of delta process. One is V1, which will load data as and when the document is created into the queue, and that all the data document created for a day is being loaded in the queue, and from this queue it goes to the another delta queue called BWP delta queue, which is a transaction code RSS7, and finally it goes to the data source. Okay, so most of the time, if you don't know what to do, which delta load to use it, the best optimum way to use is the Q delta serialized to V3. Okay, and there is another one called unserialized. So serialized here, and you see unserialized. In the sense here, data is whatever the sales order created, it's stored in the queue in a serialized manner. Okay, it's like where you know what is serialized, right? So every time one document is created, that is stored, and then the next document based on the increasing in the time order. Okay, but we also have another one called unserialized V3 update. What this will do is, you see totally different scenarios here, right? So what's happening here is unserialized means, that whenever there is a document is posted, the document will be loaded in the application table as well in the, the target table, and from target table it goes to the delta queue. So here what happens is there is no serialization of data. Okay, so it could mix up, mix up the process. Basically, you don't know when the sales order, previous sales order was created, when is the new sales order created. Nothing is been serialized. It's like from different places. For example, 10 users are there. So 10 users is creating a sales document. It just does not serialize the order of the data or document based on the timing. It just loads as and when the data is created. Okay, or document is created. So this method is only used whenever we do not have a large amount of data, or we don't. There will be always a possibility of making a when there is no large amount of data, you can try to this one. But the best method is to create or load data using Q delta or serialized V3 only. Okay. So this is the steps for logistic extraction. The first step is you need to know what is a data source. For example, 2LIS 11 VHTR is the data source. What I'm going to pick up now. We will do this one probably next class, but I'm just going to tell you how to do this. And then you need to identify the setup table. I will also explain how to do this one. And next is what is the delta mechanism. Like I said, it's always Q delta is the best approach to load data into VW from ECC for LO extraction. So this is the steps we will be doing for a LO extraction. First is to install the data source from business content. You log into ECC, RSA 5, and then you have to install the business content which we saw yesterday. This is the business content. Okay. Then RSA 6 is to check the data source whether it's available or activated or not. And then next step is to go to a transaction called LBWE. This we would not have seen in the FI extraction. This is a new transaction code. So what this will do is you're going to maintain the data source transfer structure and regenerate the data source, which you will see. Okay, I was telling you in the previous couple of screens back what is the transfer structure and extract structure, right? So that's the process we will do in LBWE. Once you do this, then you switch back to business warehouse and then you replicate the data source in the RSA1. Okay, same data source, right? Replicate. And again come back to ECC. Again come back to, sorry about that, for the silence. Let's come back to ECC and then activate the extractor structure. And you have to select the what update mode or update method. Okay, right? So update method is basically we will see all those things out. The LBWE is the place where you will do the update method. Okay. Then you do the delete the setup tables. LBWEG. If there is any previous data available, or probably some junk data is there, you have to delete. So make sure you delete it. Okay. And perform a setup extraction. SBIW. That's in the whatever you see in orange is basically in ECC, and then the blue is in the BW. Okay. Once you perform the setup extraction, then you have to create an info package for delta and then RSA1. Then you go back to the ECC and then plan a V3 collective run. This is the update mode, right? V1, V2, V3, right? V3 is synchronized collective run. Okay, the trigger based LBWE. Then once you do this, then the next step is to maintain the info package for the delta extraction in the RSA1. This is the steps for loading the data from ECC to BW for LO extraction. Okay. So for today, I will stop here with the theoretical session, and then tomorrow what I will do is I will go ahead and pick the example whatever we saw here, and what example we saw. Okay, this is the one, right? LISVSTR or some other data source, and then we will see how to load data from ECC into BW for LO extraction. Okay, so that's about it for today, and we will see the practical session in next class. Okay, so what I would suggest you to go through this session, these two slides with the class again and again to find out or get the difference between the different types of delta method, update mode, and everything. Okay, I will also send you some notes for this one. Right? Okay, thank you so much. Bye now.